Today on the Bandrew Says podcast, we're going to talk about YouTube banning vaccine misinformation, Amazon being sued by a bunch of their old sellers, their real Neumann microphones, and a couple of other things, so go ahead and stick around. Let's start with the thrilling news that YouTube is banning vaccine misinformation. This last week, they put out a policy update that, to summarize, stated something along the lines of, if you post vaccine misinformation, we will find you, we will strike you, we will take you down. I will, of course, post the policy update in the episode notes as well as a video that YouTube published about this, but I want to go ahead and read through some of the policy so we can discuss it. What this policy means for you. If you're posting content, don't post content on YouTube if it includes harmful misinformation about currently approved and administered vaccines on any of the following: vaccine safety, content alleging that vaccines cause chronic side effects outside of rare side effects that are recognized by health authorities; efficacy of vaccines, content claiming that vaccines do not reduce transmission or contraction of disease; ingredients in vaccines, content misrepresenting the substances contained in vaccines. Here are some examples of content that's not allowed on YouTube. Claims that vaccines cause chronic side effects such as cancer, diabetes, or other chronic side effects. Claims that vaccines do not reduce the risk of contracting illness. Claims that vaccines contain substances that are not on the vaccine ingredient list, such as biological matter from fetuses, e.g., fetal tissue, fetal cell lines, or animal byproducts. Claims that vaccines contain substances or devices meant to track or identify those who've received them. Claims that vaccines alter a person's genetic makeup, claims that the MMR vaccine causes autism, claims that vaccines are part of a depopulation agenda, claims that the flu vaccine causes chronic side effects such as infertility, claims that the HPV vaccine causes chronic side effects such as paralysis. What happens if content violates this policy? If your content violates this policy, we'll remove the content and send you an email to let you know. If this is your first time violating our community guidelines, you'll likely get a warning with no penalty to your channel. If it's not, we may issue a strike against your channel. If you get 3 strikes within 90 days, your channel will be terminated. We may terminate your channel or account for repeated violations of the community guidelines or terms of service. We may also terminate your channel or account after a single case of severe abuse or when the channel is dedicated to a policy violation. Now, before we even discuss the policy, I want to include a bit of personal experience. If you are a content creator and they say, hey, we might give you a warning and then 3 strikes and then ban you, don't expect that. As somebody who didn't do anything wrong, I was banned off of YouTube for spam, scams, and commercially deceptive practices when all I did was read Grimm's fairy tales. So if you are relying on the strike system, do not do it, because they will just completely bypass it and ban you and state, oh, it was so egregious we couldn't help but ban them. Do not rely on that. If they have a reason to and they want to, they will ban you. Even if they don't have a reason, they'll say, whoops, didn't mean to do that. That was purely a mistake. They'll ban you if they want to. But with that personal stuff out of the way, let me share my controversial opinion about this. I think this is a bad policy, and I will explain, but first, let me play a very short clip from the video that they published, and then I will address it.
Health authorities like the World Health Organization have given clear medical guidance on the safety, efficacy, and ingredients of approved vaccines. Content that contradicts this guidance and poses a serious risk of egregious harm by spreading medical misinformation is not allowed on YouTube and can result in a community guideline strike or other consequences for your channel.
Now, why do I think this is a bad policy? In that video clip, they are stating that if your content contradicts the World Health Organization's guidance, it is not going to be allowed on YouTube. Why is that an issue to me? The WHO is not infallible. They make mistakes. Their guidance changes as new information becomes available. People were considered conspiracy theorists and only months later proven right as the WHO altered their guidance and their stance as they gained more information. Now, to be clear, I'm not faulting the WHO for that. I'm not faulting any scientist for that. That's what science is. Give me information. Calculate. Here is my new hypothesis. Here is my new stance. Here is my new guide. That's how it works. That's how it works. I'm not faulting the WHO for that or any scientist, but I am pointing out the difficulty of enforcing a policy like this on an ever-moving target. These organizations constantly receive new information, and because of that, their guidance, their stance, their opinions change. So is YouTube going to keep a database of every single strike that's issued and why that strike was issued, and if that information ever becomes non-contradictory to the guidance of the WHO, will they reverse that strike? Something tells me that's not going to be the case, and that's the issue that I have with it. They are going to be banning vaccine misinformation based on today's standards, today's guidance from the WHO, but they will not be retroactively reversing those strikes if that information that was contradictory becomes no longer contradictory and actually the guidance of the WHO. That's the issue that I have. And when I say the WHO, I mean any of the organizations that YouTube holds to high regard. They just gave the WHO as an example. And that's all I have to say about that topic, but now let me go ahead and play another clip from the video. It raises a lot of questions for me, so here's a very short clip from this video.
The safety of our creators, viewers, and partners is our highest priority.
Let me go ahead and repeat that line with the emphasis on the correct syllable. The safety of our creators, viewers, and partners is our highest priority. What does that mean? Who are YouTube's partners? How could vaccine misinformation harm YouTube's partners? Are YouTube's partners their advertisers, meaning it's Coca-Cola, GameStop, Panera Bread, Betty's Flower Shop? Are those their partners? And if so, how would vaccine misinformation have a negative impact and harm Coca-Cola, GameStop, Pepsi Max? Is that still a thing? Betty's Flower Shop? I don't know. I don't have ads on YouTube. How would vaccine misinformation harm them? Would saying a negative thing about vaccines harm the consumption of just an everyday good? I don't see how it could. The only way that I could see vaccine misinformation harming YouTube's partners is if YouTube's partners included these massive vaccine manufacturers or these multinational pharmaceutical companies. Because if there's a video saying, hey, you shouldn't take this vaccine because X, Y, or Z, and then there's an ad saying, hey, here's a vaccine that solves this, that might negatively impact the adoption of that vaccine, which would be direct harm to that company, to YouTube's partner. Coca-Cola, Amazon, Target, Betty's Flower Shop, none of them will be harmed by vaccine misinformation being perpetrated on YouTube. It just won't happen. The only group of people, the only partners that YouTube might have that would be harmed by it are those vaccine manufacturers themselves. So either that's the case, or maybe YouTube should just elaborate on who their partners are, because based on this, I don't know who else it could be other than the actual pharmaceutical companies. I don't think that's the best policy to have, because if that's the new standard, then any negative reviews of a company that advertises on YouTube could then be viewed as harming one of YouTube's partners, and then you could be banned? So I don't know if that's the case. I may be completely off base here, but that's my understanding of it. YouTube needs to explain who their partners are and how they would be harmed by vaccine misinformation, because other than that, I don't know. So how does this impact you as a content creator on YouTube? If you don't talk about any medical stuff, if you don't talk about vaccines, it will have zero impact on you unless I'm correct in my assumption that saying something bad about an advertiser does negatively impact one of YouTube's partners, and then they take you down. If that's the new policy going forward, then we need to rethink all of this because YouTube is going down if that's the case. But if you are not talking about medical stuff, it likely won't impact you. If you are talking about medical stuff, you need to be thorough, you need to have all the information that you can, and you need to include it in your video to provide context, to ensure that you can prove that you're right and say, YouTube, you cannot ban me because here's the information from X, Y, or Z. Don't ban me. Don't strike me, bro. Don't strike me. That's all that needs to change. You need to be a little bit more thorough with your sources and provide them in the video if that's your thing. How does this impact you if you're a viewer? It really doesn't unless you really love this type of content. I don't know who in their right mind would just watch nothing but vaccine stuff. That would be a terrible existence. But if you do like that stuff, go find a different platform. Go watch on Odyssey. But one piece of advice, do not look at the comments. Holy crap. Holy crap. I had always thought that people were being hyperbolic discussing these non-YouTube platforms in the comment sections. And no, they were not being hyperbolic. Those comment sections suck. There's so much stuff about Jewish people in them. It's insane. It's literally insanity in the comment sections. So do not look at them. Yikes. But are there any mitigating steps that you can take as a content creator to ensure that you don't get removed from the platform and lose everything that you've been working for? It really is just back up your content. I would recommend Odyssey. That is Odyssee. You can set it to automatically back up any video that you upload to YouTube. Really a wonderful service, minus the comment section. I don't want them to censor it or do any of that stuff. It's one of those free speech places, but the comment section sucks. They're so bad. And this goes on Odyssey, and pretty much any time that I mention any platform other than Odyssey, there are people saying, I can't even repeat what they call these platforms. I can't do it. They hate them. They hate Twitch and they hate YouTube. And they like calling it YouTube, but it rhymes with, how do I put this? I'll spell it out because that'll make it better, right? They call it JEW tube. It's absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, that's pretty much the conclusion of the story. I think it's a bad policy, but we'll see how it rolls out and how terrible it goes. I will link the policy post from YouTube as well as the video in case you want to watch them. Next, Amazon is being sued by companies that were banned for review fraud. I talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago. Companies were banned for review fraud, and now those companies are suing YouTube. Not YouTube, Amazon. They're suing Amazon. Now, Amazon is not being sued because they banned a bunch of companies. They are being sued because, according to the claimants, the plaintiffs, I don't know all the legal jargon. The people who are suing them are saying that Amazon is withholding hundreds or hundreds of thousands of dollars. However, if we look at the Amazon Business Solution Agreement, it states the following. If we determine that your actions or performance may result in returns, chargebacks, claims, disputes, violations of our terms or policies, or other risks to Amazon or third parties, then we may, in our sole discretion, withhold any payments to you for as long as we determine any related risks to Amazon or third parties persist. So based on the policy that every single one of those sellers had to agree to, it seems as though Amazon has the full authority and the right to withhold that money from those sellers because there does appear to be a risk to Amazon due to the review fraud. Think about it this way. If there are a bunch of fake 5-star reviews for a product that leads to a mass influx of people purchasing that crappy product based on the assumption that the reviews are accurate and the product is outstanding, what happens when all of those people get a product that sucks? They might all return it. So Amazon would need to hold that cash in case there is a chargeback, in case there's a return. I imagine that as time goes on and that return window for those items that were sold closes, Amazon might then start to return the money to the companies. But until then, Amazon would still be liable to give that money back if a consumer returns a crappy product. And if Amazon had sent them all the money, all these sellers their money, and closed their account and severed ties to the bank accounts, they wouldn't have any way to get paid back for that crappy returned product, which should not have received a 5-star review. My response to all of this is good. I hope these companies never get that money back. I hope they never are able to sell another item on Amazon. And the reason that I feel so strongly about it is because review fraud is scummy, it's dishonest, and who does it hurt? It hurts the individual consumer. The person who works a job they hate to earn a bare minimum, and then they have a few extra bucks and they say, I want to buy something nice for myself. Here's something that's rated really highly, and then they get it, and it absolutely sucks. I hate the fact that these companies have scammed so many people and have stolen so much hard-earned money from them. Absolutely scummy and terrible. And on top of that, it undermines the entire idea or the entire functioning system of a free market. Because in a free market, good products rise to the top and succeed. Bad products in a free market fall to the bottom and fail. How is that accomplished? That's accomplished through the dissemination of information, through word of mouth. Somebody saying, hey, here's a really great product. You're looking for a product like this? Here, this is a good one. I've used it. I like it. This completely undermines all of that because you can no longer trust a word that you hear about it because the opinions are bought and paid for. So now the bad products succeed, they rise to the top, they sell the most, and the good products, they don't have that inflation of reviews. They don't have that inflation of positive opinions being broadcast about them, so they don't meet that quota. They're not able to continue to produce that product. It's insane. I really shouldn't be this upset about it, but it really does bother me because it actually does harm that individual who works a job they hate. I have been that person working for $10 an hour, working 40 hours a week, finally having enough to buy a DVD or buy a DVD player, and then I get the cheapest one because it's one that I can afford, and it has a bunch of 5-star ratings, and then it's a piece of crap. I've been that person, and it sucks. So screw these companies. I hope they never get another dime. I hope none of the people who work there, who founded the companies, can ever sell another item on Amazon. Screw them up their stupid rear ends. Anyway, I'll link some articles. I shouldn't be so bothered by this. I need to calm down. I'm going to give myself a heart attack. Next, Facebook is pausing development of Instagram Kids. Apparently, there's some research that came out saying that Instagram is bad for kids. I'm gonna file this one under no duh. Yeah, what a shocker. This is insane. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, hey, it's not just not good for kids, it's not good for anybody. It's not good for anybody of any age. It should be banned. All social media ought to be banned because it's terrible. Look at how it's affected society. It has been a net drain on the majority of people who use it. I think the world would be such a better place if all social media was banned, just completely deleted, erased, no longer in existence, except for maybe YouTube, because I love YouTube so much, even though I'm criticizing them for trying to stifle speech. But oh God, this episode's just off the rails. I know people are going to hate me after this one. That's all the news. What have I been testing? You have been listening to it. This is the Microtech Gefell UMT70S FET. This is a $1,600 multi-pattern FET condenser microphone. I'll explain why I bought this, but I want to give you a little bit of history about Microtech Gefell because it is so incredibly interesting. During World War II, Neumann was founded or existed in Berlin. That's where their factory was. But due to a bunch of bombings, they ended up moving their factory to a town or city called Gefell. Following the war, though, a bunch of the employees that had moved to Gefell decided to move back to Berlin, and they started a new company called Georg Neumann GmbH. I think I pronounced that right, Georg. It's like George without an E. And that Georg Neumann GmbH company, that's the company that was purchased by Sennheiser, and that's the company that makes the Neumann microphones. So if you think about it, Gefell microphones, Microtech Gefell, is the true original Neumann microphone. They were the ones who made the M7 capsule for the CMV3, I think that was their bottle microphone. And they've continued to make that capsule. That's why I bought this specific microphone, the UMT70S, because it uses the classic M7 capsule. Why does the M7 capsule matter? Because the M7 capsule is the capsule that was used in the U-47, the U-48, and the M49. 3 incredibly famous, classic, legendary, wonderful microphones that are impossible to acquire now. They are impossible to acquire, yet this has the same capsule that Gefell has been making since the 40s. How incredible is that? And I heard a couple people say this is supposed to sound kind of like a U-87. Not really. Doesn't really sound a lot like a U-87, so you're not getting a U-87 for $2,000 cheaper. Just don't expect that. And I will link the history in the comments and the show notes because read the entire thing. It is fascinating. Gefell and Neumann, they built Okay, this is a fun little fact. They just dropped this in there as a little line. A plane had crashed outside of Gefell's factory, and they needed materials to build the diaphragms for their microphones, so they just went out back and tore down the plane and took the materials from that. How crazy is that? We need materials for the capsule of this. There's a plane out back that crashed during the war. Go grab that. How cool is that? All right, we're not doing any what you had to say. Let's jump to the Ask Bandrew segment. Okay, it is the Ask Bandrew segment. If you have any questions that you want answered, go to askbandrew.com. There are instructions on how to send in audio, video, and text-based questions. I do prefer audio and video because I'm a stupid idiot person and I suck at reading. Send in audio and video. Please, thank you. AskBandrew.com. First submission comes from Matt from Chicago. Take it away, Matt.
Hi, Bandrew. My name's Matt. I'm a big fan of podcastage and recently became a regular listener of the Bandrew Says podcast. I relied heavily on your videos and those of Curtis Judd when picking up audio equipment for myself, primarily for podcasting and some occasional corporate-style videos for work. I'm in a bit of an interesting situation. For my spoken word applications, I recently bit the bullet and picked up an SM7B, and I'm absolutely loving it. You're hearing that right now, running into an SSL 2 Plus interface at a bit depth of 24 bits, a sampling rate of 48 kHz with the 4K mode turned off. The gain is set at approximately 430 with a little bit of a boost in post. Sorry, no doobly-doo for audio submissions. Even though my home office is completely untreated for sound, this works really nicely, and I'm loving how all of it sounds on my voice. But not infrequently, I'm recording podcasts on the go, either around the hospital that I work at or in the offices there, which are all completely untreated for sound. I don't love the idea of carrying my SSL 2 Plus around because I feel that the knobs could easily be damaged in a backpack or a bag. After watching a number of different videos on your channel, I considered some other options. I've just now switched the SM7B to run into my Zoom H5. The gain is set at about 7, still at a bit depth of 24 bits and a sampling rate of 48 kHz. The H5 is pretty awesome in terms of form factor to just chuck into my bag inside its padded hardshell case. As one of your callers mentioned on the last episode, the H5 definitely has some noisier preamps, but let me put a little spectral denoise on it in isotope. I think it seems pretty manageable after that. Now, I did pick up a FET-head inline mic activator, which I thought would be an amazing addition given its portability and low EIN. But here in Chicago, I must be in RF interference central, because this is what I got with the SM7B with a FET-head running into the H5. This is an audio test of the Shure SM7B dynamic microphone running into a Zoom H5 recorder at a bit depth of 24 bits and a sampling rate of 48 kHz. I'm using Monoprice Premier cables, which are, I think, sort of middle of the road for shielding, but it actually didn't matter whether the FET-head was on the mic side of the cable or on the H5 side. I still got tremendous interference and local radio stations. I even connected my H5 directly into the FET-head, just hanging off the side of the SM7B. I totally don't recommend that, but I was trying to troubleshoot. Despite having no cable run whatsoever, I still got my lovely local FM radio tunes. So I'm now sort of back to square one. I think that the Sound Devices Mix Pre series or the Zoom F series recorders are a little bit beyond what I'm looking to spend right now, so I think the H5 still remains my best bet for portability and ease of use. I think my options are, as I see it, number 1, stick with the H5 preamps and run some light denoise on them like you're hearing right now. Option number 2, I could switch to this, which you're now hearing, my SE Electronics V7 dynamic handheld microphone, running into the H5, gain set at about 630, still at a sampling rate of 48 kHz and a bit depth of 24 bits. From a form factor perspective, it's actually even better than the SM7B for chucking in a backpack, but I am a bit sad not to have that warmth and smoothness of the SM7B. Option number 3, I could try upgrading my cables and trialing other mic activators, which I unfortunately can't demonstrate for you. I was thinking about the SE Dynamite or the Cloud Lifter. I have read some anecdotes online that the FET heads do have some sensitivity to RF interference, but I've also heard similar stories about the other options, and I suppose I don't have much of a reason to expect those to be significantly more resistant to interference than the FET head. Back to my favorite setup now on the SM7B and the SSL2 Plus again. Thanks again for all that you do on your channel and your podcast. I know this is a long submission without a clear question, but I'm curious what your thoughts are having heard all of these different samples and knowing what sort of equipment I have at my disposal right now. Hopefully there's some fun and useful audio in there for your audience, and I'm hoping that maybe this will help out some other people who might be in a similar situation. Take care and keep being awesome.
This is an outstanding voice submission from Matt, and maybe I'm a shill, or maybe I'm just acclimated and used to the SM7B, but I think you sound great on it. I really enjoy it. You gave 3 options for yourself. 1, use the 7B with the H5 and then run spectral denoise. Great option. Option 2, use the SE Electronics V7 into the H5. Also an outstanding option. And option 3, try other cables and microphone activators to try to find one that doesn't have that same issue. I think that options 1 or 2 is going to be your best bet for the situation. The reason I say this is I think you're going to run into the same issue with option 3 over and over again. I don't think it's an issue with your cables because when you are using the microphone directly into the interfaces with the cables, you don't have that issue. It only appears to be an issue once you introduce the microphone activator, the FET head. And I have also heard anecdotal stories about people running into that same issue where the SE Electronics, the Dynamite, has the same RF issue. I haven't run into any of those issues with them, but apparently I'm in an RF dead area unless I'm using the CAD U1. So I don't think option 3 is going to yield anything that's significantly better. So again, option 1 or 2 is the route I'd go with. Option 1 sounds great with the spectral denoise, but that's going to be more of a pain for you to carry into work. Having to carry an SM7B and a mic stand for that might just be too difficult or too much of a burden, and then you'll hate taking it in, and you'll choose not to take it in because of that. Option 2 sounds great. Maybe not as good as the SM7B, one of the greatest microphones of all time, in my opinion. I know people hate it. Keep hating on it. I still think it's wonderful. But maybe not as good as the 7B, but still great. And it's going to be much more practical and convenient for you to carry into work, which is going to come into play after continuing to carry it in day after day after day after day. You're going to get sick of the extra weight, the extra bulk of the 7B very quickly. So I would probably venture a guess that option 2 is going to be your best bet. But this was sent in June. Matt, if you still listen, let me know in the comments what you ended up doing. What was your selection? Did you end up going option 1, 2, or did you try other mic activators and other cables? Let me know in the comments down below. Option 1 or 2. Option 2 is probably going to be the route to go. Next, we have an email from Tommy. They say, It would be great if you could please explain a bit what makes a microphone easy to listen to, or the other way around. What makes a microphone fatiguing, and what are your favorite mics with that in mind? Thanks a lot, Bandrew. Tommy, thank you very much for the submission. That is an excellent question. The commonality between microphones that I would classify as easy to listen to is they're typically not overboosted in any of the frequency ranges, so you're not going to have a greatly exaggerated top frequency. You're not going to have an extremely mid-forward and boosted midsection, and you're not going to have an over-exaggerated low end. It's going to be a relatively neutral-sounding microphone. It can still have a bit of coloration, a bit of alteration to the sound source, but it's not going to be really drastic. It's going to be a bit more neutral compared to something that I would consider fatiguing or hard to listen to. In my opinion, one of the more easy to listen to microphones would be the Neumann U87AI. Now, it's not going to be everybody's favorite sounding microphone because it does have its own coloration. It sounds like a U87AI, and some folks will not want that. But I think it's undeniable that it's not overboosted, it's not fatiguing, it's not difficult to listen to. You could listen to me speak on this microphone for hours, and it wouldn't ever feel as though you're being stabbed in the ear, unless I'm just spouting some absolute nonsense, and the information that I'm speaking into the microphone makes it feel like I'm stabbing you in the ear. So this would be an easy to listen to microphone. But on the other hand, with fatiguing microphones, one of the common problem areas for me is the upper frequencies of the mic. It's going to be a little bit overboosted. It might sound a little bit artificial, sibilant. It could also sound like my air conditioner just turned on, but also like you are actually being stabbed in the ears. That's going to be on more extreme examples, but as far as fatiguing microphones go, this is the Lewitt LCT440, and this is a very bright microphone, especially coming from the U87. Now again, I want to make it clear that this is just my opinion, and it's based on my application of microphones. Some folks may want that really excited top end of this mic I'm using right now, the LCT440. If you're doing a 3-minute pop song, you may want that really shiny upper end where you roll off all the low end and you just got this really bright, high-fidelity sound. But for a 30-minute talking video, that might get very, very tiring to listen to. You might have sibilants that over a 30-minute period, that will make you want to rip your headphones off and stab yourself in the eye for some reason. I don't know why. But that may be something that you find. So based on your application, based on what your preferences are, that's going to determine what kind of sound profile you're looking for. Whether you do want this really exciting boosted top end of the Lewitt LCT440, or if you want something that's a bit more neutral like the Neumann U87AI, a little bit softer in the top end, not quite as detailed or hyper-articulate, as I would put it, as the Lewitt, or maybe you want something like the 7B, which is a bit darker of a microphone, but gosh darn it, I could hear people talking. I'm losing my mind. I could listen to people talking on the 7B for 5 hours straight and not bat an eye or an ear. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. I hope that gave you some insight into what I classify as easy to listen to versus what I find a bit fatiguing. Thank you very much, Tommy, and let's go to the last voice submission. Take it away, Sean. Sean, pick up the phone! Somebody's going to get that reference. Okay, let's go. And actually, before we jump to the next voice submission, I forgot to answer my favorite microphones. My favorite microphone is probably the SM7B. This thing just works on my voice. It's so pleasant to listen to. It's so easy to work with. It works on pretty much everything as well. I know a ton of people hate it because it's darker. It doesn't have that same condenser-like detail, but as far as what I need a microphone for, the 7B, this could have been the last microphone that I've bought, and this was the first real microphone that I bought, and it's still 6 years later, almost 7 years later, still kicking and screaming and working like a charm. So SM7B is up there Obviously, Neumann U67. My gosh, I love that thing. And off the top of my head, those are the two I'm going with, 7B and U67. Okay, now let's jump to the last voice submission.
Hey, Bandrew, it's Sean. Hey, man. I was just gifted a Furman power conditioner, and I was just wondering, since you know more about these things than I do, could you explain to me, and maybe some other people, what the importance of a power conditioner is? At the time of recording this, I have not actually hooked up a power conditioner, just because it's like 9:30 at night here. So yeah, that's it. Hope all is well. Apriya.
Sean, thank you very much for the voice submission. I ought to say that I apriya. Thank you very much for the awesome question. What is the importance of a power conditioner? My understanding of power conditioners was always that it's going to help maintain a consistent voltage level to the gear that you have plugged into it, and that will ultimately lead to a more consistent performance of that gear. Also, it does provide surge protection, which I do think would fall under the description I provided, maintaining a consistent voltage level for your gear, because a spike, a surge, that's not consistent. So it's obviously going to provide surge protection, but I don't know how it does this, but it somehow reduces some kind of noise that is introduced through unclean power. I don't know how it does that, but it does it. I don't know what else to say. I will link a video from Sweetwater. I wonder if there's a video out there that demonstrates the clean power versus dirty power. I want to hear how that affects the performance of audio gear, because it says that that's pretty drastic and pretty noticeable. Maybe I've just been very fortunate and never run into an issue where you have very inconsistent and very dirty power. I know when I toured in a band, we did run into a lot of issues with, you might actually get shocked, but that's grounding. That's not dirty power. I know sometimes you would just get radio signals running through the power supply. I don't know if that was through the power supply or just if there was so much RF interference that it made its way into your audio cables that were unbalanced. I don't know. So if anybody knows of a video demonstrating the difference between clean and dirty power, link it in the YouTube comments for this episode. I would love to know a little bit more, and I will link a Sweetwater video in the description and episode notes if you want to check that out. And that's it for this episode. I've got nothing else. I drank a bunch of water because my throat is hurting. I don't know why this episode was so difficult to get through. Perhaps it's because I talked about something that I know is very touchy and might get me banned off YouTube. If I disappear, who cares? Who cares? Whatever. All right, that's it. That's it for this week. I appreciate you coming by and watching and or listening. You are a wonderful human being. You are special. You are lovely. You are just a unique little flower, aren't you? Yeah, you're wonderful. Okay, sorry about that. That was very condescending. I love you. Have an amazing Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Next Sunday, I will talk at you, and bye.
This has been a Geeks Rising production. Your executive producer is Bandrew Scott. For more information, head over to www.geeksrising.com.